The distress call drifted through the silent darkness, weak and fractured, like the dying heartbeat of a forgotten world. It wasn't meant for human ears. It wasn't meant for human ships. It wasn't meant for anyone within 10,000 light-years. Yet space has its echoes. And Earth has its watchers. Across the outer listening posts of the Terran frontier, a faint signal flickered onto ancient consoles. A language not spoken on Earth. A code pattern not aligned with any known ally. A cry for help coming from a species humanity had never met. It repeated only twice before collapsing into static, as if something had silenced it mid-broadcast, and yet, humanity answered, not because it was their responsibility. Not because it was their duty, not because they believed they were needed, but because throughout every era, from wooden ships to star-wrapped cruisers, humanity had never once ignored a call for help. In the silent void beyond the Orion Gate, the Terran Vanguard fleet shifted course. Dozens of cruisers, carriers, and long-range escorts turned as one. Their engines ignited like stars being born, casting long shimmering reflections through nebula dust. Within minutes, a message pulsed back through subspace, "We heard you." By the time the fleet arrived at the coordinates, the dust clouds had already changed color. Energetic residue drifted like smoke. Burned-out hulls of alien ships spun slowly. Metal warped beyond recognition. The system was silent except for a few fractured life signals, faint, terrified, fading. Humanity stepped into the ruin of a war it had not started. A war that had chewed through an entire civilization in hours, leaving only debris and unanswered questions. Terran Marines boarded what remained of the largest ship, a vessel shaped like an ivory crescent, its hull cracked open like bone. Inside, they found survivors. Fragile creatures with luminous veins and glass-like skin, trembling under the harsh breath of a star they no longer had the power to orbit safely. They recoiled at first. Fear painted across their delicate faces. Confusion radiating in waves. These were the ones who had made the call, but they had not meant to reach humanity. They had not meant to reach anyone like humanity. Their message was never meant to say help us. It was meant to say warn the others. The enemy that shattered their world had been a species known only in myth, harvesters of star energy, consumers of planetary cores. They moved without being seen. They struck without being predicted. And the ivory-skinned survivors believed humanity had come too late. They misunderstood something fundamental about Earth's children. Humanity did not come to witness a tragedy. Humanity came to end one. The fleet deployed. Fighters spread through the silent wreckage. Scanners lit up with signatures of impossible aggression. Strange gravitational waves pulsed from the shadows of a dead moon. Something was moving there, something vast, patient, hungry, and for a moment, humanity paused. Not out of fear. But out of reflection. Across the ships, soldiers tightened their harnesses. Engineers whispered to their consoles. Captains stared through reinforced glass at a system that had been peacefully orbiting its star only days ago. They felt a familiar ache, the ache of a species that had survived genocide, invasion, and extinction more times than history remembered. They felt the weight of another civilization looking to them now, trembling beneath the ruins of their once beautiful world. Humanity had been underestimated many times by the galaxy, but the galaxy never learned. When humans arrived, they did not arrive alone. They arrived with every lesson they had ever bled for. Every scar written into their nature. Every flame that had refused to die across centuries of struggle, and now an entire alien species looked up at them through fractured helmets and flickering holograms. Realizing humanity had come because humanity always came, even when not invited, even when not expected, even when the message was sent by mistake. The survivors watched as the Terran fleet began to align for battle, their silhouettes framed against the system's dying light. They had never seen ships move with such purpose. Never seen engines burn so bright. Never felt the presence of a species that carried the quiet fury of 1,000 near extinctions. They did not understand humanity yet, but they would. The darkness stirred beyond the dead moon, and humanity prepared to answer the call, not with words, but with an armada. the first transmission from the alien world was still being analyzed when every major power on Earth realized the same terrifying truth. The incoming message wasn't a plea for help. It was a warning. Or perhaps a confession. A confession of fear. The alien voice had spoken of a devourer, a force that consumed star systems the way fire devours dry leaves. And somehow, impossibly, whatever it was coming for them. The world reacted with a clarity that history had rarely seen. Nations that once whispered threats now exchanged blueprints. Old rivals shook hands. In a matter of days, humanity did something no alien in the galaxy would have imagined possible. It united. For the first time, the entire planet behaved as if it shared one heartbeat. The skies above Earth darkened with construction swarms. Orbital foundries glowed like artificial suns. Every engine that had ever pushed a ship beyond low orbit was replaced with something stronger, faster, and more brutal. Humanity had achieved a level of engineering that no alien species had predicted, because no alien species had ever been forced to build while standing on the edge of extinction. Humans were no longer exploring the stars. They were preparing for war. What the aliens had mistaken for a helpless young race was anything but helpless. Earth had spent centuries learning violence the hard way. It had learned compassion even harder. Humanity didn't descend into panic. It descended into purpose. A coalition fleet began to take shape in low orbit, sleek gunmetal hulls lined with shimmering defensive lattices, carriers large enough to swallow city blocks, cruisers with spines of golden reactors, and destroyers etched with the names of every city that had donated resources. The fleet wasn't built to intimidate. It was built to protect. It was built to survive the unimaginable. Yet even as engineers and strategists labored, something else stirred in humanity's heart. A debate as old as civilization resurfaced. Why should we help them? The alien message had described a world far beyond Earth's reach. A species unfamiliar, unknown, and untested. Humanity had been ignored by the galaxy for centuries, dismissed as primitive, violent, unfocused. Now those same distant civilizations were begging Earth to intervene in a war they couldn't fight. Some argued it wasn't humanity's fight. Others said humanity owed nothing to creatures who had never offered so much as a greeting. But then came the second transmission, shorter, more frantic, and filled with a terror so raw that every translator on Earth froze. There were children screaming in the background. Alien children. Their cries weren't so different from human ones. Suddenly, the argument ended. Humanity did not turn away from children begging for life. Not humans. Not ever. A new urgency gripped the world. Volunteer numbers surged. Entire divisions of retired pilots returned to duty without hesitation. Scientists who had spent their lives studying exotic physics were flown to high-orbit labs to burn through formulas as if their minds were torches. The fleet doubled in size. Then tripled. Every nation agreed on one truth, spoken in 1,000 languages but meaning the same thing. If the devourer threatened them today, it would threaten humanity tomorrow. The alien cry for help wasn't a burden. It was a mirror. Humanity saw its own possible future reflected in another species' desperation. And it refused to let that reflection become reality. When the first ships ignited their engines and began forming into formation, every sensor operator on Earth paused to stare. From orbit, the Armada didn't look like a fleet. It looked like a storm. A storm forged from metal and stubbornness, from compassion sharpened by centuries of conflict. Humanity was answering the call, not as saviors, not as conquerors, but as a force that refused to leave anyone behind in the dark. The alien world had whispered for aid. Humanity responded with thunder. The Armada slipped into the void with a silence that felt unnatural for something so vast. Thousands of vessels vanished into the deep, leaving Earth's orbit quiet for the first time in weeks. But the silence did not mean peace. It meant anticipation. Because humanity wasn't leaping into an unknown darkness. It was flying straight toward a cosmic wound, toward a star whose light patterns had begun to stutter like a dying heartbeat, the journey stretched across a gulf of space so immense that no human ship had ever crossed it before. But on this voyage, humanity bent the rules. Experimental drives hummed with unstable brilliance. Wormhole stabilizers stitched paths through uncharted folds of spacetime. Every hour, crew members felt the faint tremors of stresses no ship was designed to endure. Yet not a single ship broke. Not a single captain considered turning back. Inside the flagship Vanguard Ascendant, a quiet determination filled every corridor. Pilots stared into the glowing nebula ahead as if it were an omen. Engineers monitored energy spikes that would have terrified any earlier generation. Soldiers rehearsed emergency deployments in zero gravity, movements sharp as practiced breathing. Some crews prayed. Others hummed music from home. Some recorded messages they hoped would never need to be delivered, but all shared one truth: humanity was no longer a species clinging to a single blue world. It was a force stepping into the cosmic stage with unshakable intent. As the fleet accelerated toward the coordinates of the alien distress signal, the first signs of abnormality appeared. Space itself became wrong. Colors stretched strangely across the viewport like smeared oil. Gravity fluctuated in soft pulses, as if some unseen pressure pushed against the hull. The stars looked farther apart, then suddenly too close. Even the fleet's AI systems began to generate warnings with no clear data behind them. Whatever the devourer was, its presence distorted reality long before it arrived. Then came the first alien vessel. Not the species that had sent the distress call, but something drifting. Mangled, broken. A once powerful star cruiser split open like a cracked ribcage. It floated motionless, covered in frost and dark streaks that no one could identify. Teams scanned it immediately. No survivors. No atmosphere. No energy. Only silence, but the scars told a deeper story. The wounds were not from weapons. They were not burns. They were not fractures. They looked like something had consumed parts of the ship, cleanly, surgically, removing matter itself. The devourer didn't kill, it erased. Humanity pushed forward, deeper into the region twisted by its influence. The closer they came, the more abandoned vessels appeared. Some belonged to species humanity had never seen. Others were clearly escaped crafts that never escaped, the alien worlds, the ones who had begged humanity for help. They had not been alone in their fear. An entire sector had been quietly screaming, their cries unheard by the larger galaxy because no one dared approach this region ever again. But humanity approached anyway. Then the fleet received the third transmission. This one wasn't a distress call. It was a farewell. A soft, broken voice whispering under static. It wasn't sent by military command. It wasn't sent by a surviving officer. It was the voice of an alien child. We can see the horizon breaking. The light is turning to dust. Please. Someone. Please. The message cut out. The sound replayed across every ship. No one ordered it. No one needed to. It replayed because every soul in the Armada felt a blade twist in their chest when they heard it. Soldiers who had spent lifetimes pretending to be stone blinked tears away. Engineers clenched their fists until blood dotted their palms. Even AI modules paused as if trying to simulate grief. Humanity did not come for glory. It did not come for conquest. It came because somewhere in the collapsing dark, children, no different from Earth's, were calling for help with their last breath. That was when the fleet saw it, a break in the nebula. A flicker of movement bigger than a moon, a ripple spreading across space like a shadow made of hunger. The devourer, it wasn't a creature, it wasn't a machine, it was an event. A phenomenon. A cosmic force that behaved like a living thing but existed like a collapse in the fabric of reality. A shifting mass of fractured geometry, swirling void light, and impossible angles. It moved without moving. It breathed without form. And it was headed directly toward the alien homeworld. Humanity didn't recoil, humanity didn't retreat. The Armada began to spread into battle formation, every hull glowed with rising power, every cannon charged like mountains about to roar, every pilot steadied their breath. If the galaxy had watched that moment, it would have seen something no alien species had believed possible from the humans of Earth. Not brutality. Not chaos, unity, courage, purpose. The devourer surged forward, warping stars around it like liquid metal, and humanity answered not with fear, but with ignition. The first salvo lit the void like sunrise, the first salvos hit like thunderclaps across the void. Humanity's fleet had no illusions, they were fragile. Every cannon shot, every missile, every experimental energy beam was a defiance against a force that could erase planets without warning. And yet, they fired. Not because they expected victory, but because the act of resistance itself was proof of existence. The devourer shifted in response, a distortion in space that bent the fleet's sensors into chaos. Light fragmented, twisted into impossible geometries, and every targeting system screamed with conflicting readings. Ships that moved as one were suddenly flung apart by gravity anomalies. Missiles curved mid-flight, spun in orbit, and vanished. The cosmic force that had consumed entire worlds tested humanity immediately, probing for weakness, but humanity was ready. Every human vessel, every pilot, every gunner had been trained to expect the impossible. And the impossible had arrived. They adapted in real time. AI navigators adjusted flight paths mid-thought. Gunners recalculated trajectories faster than any computer should have allowed. Engineers rerouted power to shields that were never meant to survive such stresses. Humanity's entire fleet became a single, living organism, fluid, responsive, resilient. Still, the devourer pressed forward, and space itself warped around it. Nebulae bled colors that no human eye could name. Stars blinked out for a heartbeat. Debris twisted in impossible spirals, drawn inward toward the creeping mass. It consumed light. It consumed matter. It was infinite in a way that no single mind could truly grasp. Then came the first direct contact. A massive shockwave erupted from the devourer's core, radiating outward, crushing small craft instantly. Entire sections of the fleet were caught in its tide. Hulls collapsed under stresses beyond comprehension. Yet even as the void claimed ships, humanity did not falter. Not one command faltered. Not one pilot turned away. Every human in the Armada braced for impact, and every weapon discharged in synchronized precision. The devourer roared, not with sound, but with vibration, a pulse that rippled across space. It was testing them, cataloging them, calculating their weaknesses. And it found none. Humanity fought not as individuals, but as a species. They moved with reckless intelligence, improvising faster than any algorithm could predict. Their courage was a weapon. Their defiance was an energy field stronger than any shield. The alien survivors had not anticipated this. From the shattered planets they had fled, they watched through trembling sensors as the human armada danced around destruction itself. Ships that should have been obliterated maneuvered through impossible gaps, firing back with precision that seemed almost reckless. Humanity's entire existence was a statement: we do not yield. From the flagship Vanguard Ascendant, Captain Rain observed the devourer, its shifting form consuming starlight as it moved. Every instinct screamed retreat. Every protocol screamed survival. But Rain knew what humans had always known: survival was not enough. Survival demanded action. Action demanded defiance. And defiance, raw, unwavering, intelligent defiance, was humanity's greatest weapon. He issued orders without hesitation. Every ship focused fire on the devourer's most unstable segments. Missiles, plasma lances, railguns, experimental gravitic disruptors, everything. The fleet surged forward in perfect formation, weaving through gravitational anomalies, dancing along the edges of annihilation itself. Then the devourer responded in a way no one could anticipate. It reshaped itself mid-battle, folding space around it like a living origami. Ships vanished. Beams twisted mid-air. The void became liquid, then solid, then impossible. A human fighter piloted by a young cadet named Lyra spun helplessly through a corridor of warped space. And yet, even trapped, Lyra fired her weapons, and the projectiles struck where none should have reached. It was as if the universe itself had conspired to bend around humanity, not to save them, but to test them. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt like a fragile concept under the Devourer's influence. The Armada took damage, lost ships, and yet every strike from humanity chipped at the edge of the impossible. Human ingenuity revealed weak points not by luck, but by observation, by instinct, by unflinching will, and then a moment arrived when the Devourer paused. It paused not because it was defeated, but because it had never encountered a species that fought with such deliberate unity. A species that refused to flee, refused to submit, refused to vanish quietly like every other civilization it had consumed. It studied them, and for the first time, it hesitated. Rain understood immediately what this meant. This hesitation was humanity's doorway. He ordered the fleet to converge. Not in fear. Not in blind assault. But with calculated, synchronized precision. Every ship, fighter, and carrier aimed toward the core of the Devourer. Every weapon fired simultaneously, creating a cascade of energy so concentrated that it tore tiny rips into the distorted fabric surrounding it. The Devourer shrieked, not in sound, but in reality itself. The void bent violently, but the human fleet pressed on. Light warped into prisms. Gravitational waves twisted around them. And through the chaos, human will remained unbroken. The alien survivors watched, mouths agape. As what they had assumed would be their final moment unfolded into something miraculous. Humanity was not only resisting the Devourer. Humanity was teaching it to fear them. It was a lesson written in fire, metal, and defiance. And somewhere deep inside the swirling mass of incomprehensible power, the Devourer realized that humanity was unlike anything it had ever encountered. Not prey. Not food. Not tools. Humans were something else entirely, a species that would not bow, a species that would not fade quietly, a species that, against all logic, would fight until the last spark of their world burned in the stars, and still push forward. The Devourer's form began to fracture. Not completely, not yet, but fissures appeared along its impossible geometry. Light leaked from the cracks, shining like molten starlight. The human armada pressed forward relentlessly, exploiting every opening that appeared. Every pilot, engineer, and gunner understood, this was the moment where history would remember what humanity could do when cornered, when pushed to the very edges of extinction, when faced with the incomprehensible. Every ship became a precision instrument. Missiles threaded through warped gravity corridors, lances of plasma arced around distortion folds, and railguns slammed projectiles into areas no calculation had ever deemed reachable. The Devourer's reactions, once perfect and unstoppable, began to lag, a ripple of miscalculation echoing through its shape. For the first time, it was vulnerable. Rain felt it in his bones. The thrill, the terror, the exhilarating weight of impossibility bending to human will. He gave the order no commander had dared to speak aloud until now: all ships, concentrate everything on the core. The fleet surged as one. Thousands of vessels converged in a storm of light, their weapons synchronized into a symphony of destruction. Hulls glowed with overcharged engines. Weapons flared like miniature suns. The void itself seemed to hold its breath as humanity poured every ounce of ingenuity, courage, and defiance into a single point of contact. And then it happened. The Devourer screamed. Space itself shuddered. Reality bent violently as if the universe itself were crying out in pain. Beams of energy, distorted and infinite, collided at the same moment, creating a cascading explosion that rippled across light years. Ships were thrown backward, some shattered, some barely holding together, but their focus remained unwavering. Inside the Devourer, fragments of light and energy began to collapse inward. Its form flickered between solid and void, an entity caught in the teeth of a species that refused to die silently. The alien survivors watched in awe and disbelief. The creatures that had been lost, their worlds devoured. Their civilization nearly ended, now had hope because humanity had chosen to fight, not for profit, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. The devourer tried to recalibrate, to consume, to erase, but the human assault was more than firepower. It was strategy, instinct, unity, and relentless intelligence. Every strike anticipated a reaction. Every maneuver exploited a flaw. Humanity had become a predator in the language of war, not because it wanted to kill, but because it would not allow annihilation to touch the innocent. Then, the first visible crack opened at the devourer's core. Light erupted like a newborn star. Fragments of the creature, particles of incomprehensible geometry, began to unravel. Entire corridors of warped space collapsed inward, dragging debris, twisted energy, and even the fleet's own missiles into spiraling chaos. Rain knew there was no turning back. The only way to end this was total commitment. He activated the Ascendant's experimental drives, channeling all remaining energy into a direct assault. Every hull seam groaned. Every system screamed. The flagship became less a vessel and more a catalyst, a spark to ignite the Devourer's undoing. The Devourer's reactions became frantic. The distortions that had once bent reality around it now tore at its own form. Beams of consumed light scattered into shards, and gravity waves tore across the battlefield, hurling wreckage and human vessels alike. Yet the Armada pressed forward, flowing through gaps, surviving where physics should have claimed them. Then came the moment of clarity. The alien survivors, for the first time, saw it, not a species bound by fragility, but one that wielded ingenuity, courage, and unity like weapons sharper than anything the galaxy had ever known. Humanity did not hesitate, did not falter, did not question the impossible. They acted because they were human, and to them, action was life itself. With a final synchronized barrage, the Devourer began to implode. Its form twisted violently, collapsing inward as if reality itself were rejecting it. The void screamed and bent, warping around the explosion. Energy spiraled outward in an aurora of impossible colors, and every ship that survived felt the tremor through hull and mind alike. And as the last fragment of the Devourer's form disappeared into the void, the human armada remained. Shattered, battered, burning, but unbroken, the alien survivors, trembling and awestruck, activated their remaining systems to follow the humans' retreating path. They had witnessed something they could not have imagined, a species small and fragile in appearance, yet infinite in will and cunning, capable of defying cosmic annihilation itself, and they understood, without words, that humanity was no mere helper. Humanity was a force. A reckoning. A storm the galaxy had long underestimated. Rain, staring from the flagship at the remnants of the Devourer, felt the weight of everything humanity had survived, everything it had endured, and everything it had yet to achieve. He whispered, not to anyone, not to the fleet, but to the void itself, "We do not bow." The void was silent for a heartbeat, yet it was alive with aftermath. Smoke-like energy from the Devourer's collapse drifted through the battlefield, twisting in patterns no human mind could fully comprehend. The stars themselves seemed unsettled, their light refracted across the broken hulls of the surviving fleet. Humanity did not cheer. They had not won easily. And victory did not feel like celebration. It felt like survival. Across the debris, the alien survivors began to stir. Their trembling vessels powered weakly, scanning for life. Their species had known terror in its purest form, but what they saw now was something alien to their own history. Humans moving among wreckage, treating the injured, salvaging what remained, repairing what could be repaired. Not as conquerors. Not as heroes. But as caretakers. Rain walked the deck of the Vanguard Ascendant, every step heavy with exhaustion yet resolute with purpose. The flagship's hull bore scars from gravitational implosions, energy backlash, and collision with drifting fragments of the Devourer. Systems flickered, alarms wavered, yet every console hummed with quiet life. Humanity had endured, and the universe had taken notice. The Devourer's destruction left an imprint on spacetime. Threads of its energy wove themselves into the fabric of nearby systems. Human sensors recorded anomalies, energy pulses, gravitational waves, light bending unnaturally, yet none of it threatened the fleet. Instead, something seemed different. Benevolent, even. Like a force that had observed humanity's resolve and decided it was worthy, the alien survivors transmitted a message, weak, hesitant, almost trembling. We did not know a species could do this. We are grateful. We will follow. It was the first acknowledgement of humanity's power, not in terms of weapons, but in terms of will. The galaxy had long assumed humans were fragile, reckless, insignificant. Now, entire civilizations saw them differently. Rain's voice, quiet but firm, echoed through the fleet's calm channels. We do not fight because we must. We fight because we choose to. And we will not bow. The fleet slowly reformed. Ships limped, engines sparking, but every vessel was aligned. Every pilot knew the message they carried back to Earth was not just a story, it was a legacy. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. Now it would remember. In the following days, the survivors from the alien worlds began to cooperate with humanity. Engineers, scientists, and strategists shared knowledge, but more importantly, they shared trust. Humanity had proven itself not just capable of surviving the impossible, but of shaping it, and yet, Rain knew that some sacrifices were irreversible. The flagship's core had been pushed to its limits. The cadets who had survived unscathed counted their blessings quietly. Every scar, every burned-out engine, every fallen comrade was a testament to the price of defiance, but even in the midst of loss, there was hope. Humanity had done what no one else could. They had faced a cosmic predator, the devourer, and they had not fled. They had not broken. They had prevailed, as the fleet departed the devastated system. Sunlight streamed through the nebula, igniting the remnants of the devourer in hues of gold and violet. The survivors watched in awe as the humans guided them toward safety. Not as masters, not as conquerors, but as equals, and somewhere deep in the currents of the void, something whispered. Perhaps it was the remnants of the devourer, perhaps the fabric of spacetime itself. But the message was clear, humanity's defiance had left a permanent mark. The galaxy had witnessed it, and it would never forget. Rain gazed at the distant horizon, a faint smile on his face despite exhaustion. They had entered the darkness when the universe expected them to cower. They had emerged into the light when no one expected them to rise. Humanity had proven a simple truth: strength is measured not just in firepower, but in courage, unity, and the refusal to bow. The stars themselves seemed to lean closer as if acknowledging it. The survivors whispered their thanks. But humans did not wait for gratitude. They had chosen this path, and that was enough. For the first time in countless millennia, humanity understood its own power. Not in dominance, not in conquest, but in defiance, in spirit, in the unyielding fire that refused to die. And somewhere beyond the stars, where the devourer had once moved unchecked, the universe itself seemed to breathe easier, knowing that a species had arisen that would protect life. Not consume it, Rain whispered, almost to himself, as the fleet returned to the familiar light of Earth. We will rise again, whenever the galaxy calls. And it will learn that humanity does not bow, and in the quiet between stars, humanity's legacy burned brighter than any sun.